everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be doing what a lot of people on BookTube have been doing lately, and that is obviously to show you my favorite books of 2018 so far. So these are the books I've read in 2018, and my list might change whenever we reach the end of the year, in which I'm going to do the top favorites of my reading year. But for now, I have found 10 books that I have all given 5 stars to, and I'm going to show them to you in order, so that I'm going to start with my least favorite. But remember that all of these books I gave 5 stars to. At place number 10, I have The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton, which is a book that you might have seen around because it has been going around a lot on BookTube lately. This is historical fiction, but it's also psychological thriller. It deals with a man who wakes up in a different body for 8 days straight. A murder has happened, and he knows that that murder will happen every day, every night at 11 p.m. So he has to find out who murders Evelyn Hardcastle, and he has to do that from these different perspectives that he wakes up in every day. It's a book with a lot of tension in it, and I devoured it because the story was good, it was original. I hadn't read a book like this before, and I ended up really liking this book. So it deserves a spot on my list, and it is on spot number 10. At spot number 9, I actually have another psychological thriller, and that is The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. This one is set in New York, and it's about this woman who is agoraphobic. She lives alone in her apartment in New York, and she never leaves that apartment because she has a fear of public spaces. So what she does is that she spies on her neighbors through the windows, and one day she spies something, an event happening in the opposite neighboring apartment that she can't ignore, and she tries her best to deal with that event, and that's basically where the plot starts. I was surprised that I loved this book as much as I did. I think it's because it's a new genre to me, this psychological thriller. I read it sometimes, occasionally, but not often, and then when I come across a book that is actually really good and to my liking, I'm surprised. But this one I think is really good because it has a great development of the characters. I love the setting of this apartment in New York City, which is actually pretty big considering the fact that it's placed in New York, and it just turned out to be a really great and thrilling read. At place number 8, I have a non-fiction book, and that is Educated by Tara Westover. This one is about our author who grew up in a family that is pretty alternative because her parents didn't believe in government, and they didn't want for their children to go to school. They didn't want to rely on anything related to the government. Furthermore, this family believed that the world would end pretty soon, so they had to prepare for that, and then their childhood became an endless preparation for when that day happened. So this book explores that childhood of Tara's through her eyes, and it was obviously very interesting to read about this alternative upbringing, and also parallel to that you hear about Tara's thoughts as she has grown up and tries to reflect back on what actually happened. I'm returning to fiction, and I have here Idaho by Emily Roskowicz, which is a literary fiction, but it's once again one of those suspenseful reads that will put you on the edge of your seat because something really bad happens in the beginning of this book. We are with a family, and we are more specifically with a mother who is sitting alone in a truck, and you can feel from the ambience that something bad is about to happen, but you don't get to know what that is until a bit later in the book. It's a story that develops family and relationships and identity, and I love those kinds of books. So I was surprised to find that story behind this cover because it was a book that I had expected to unhaul. I gave it a chance, and I'm so happy I did because what a beautiful story. At spot number 6, I have another historical fiction, and this is The Mermaid and Mrs. Hancock by Imogen Hermes Gawar. So this one is about a mermaid But actually it's more about Mr. Hancock and Angelica, who don't know each other to begin with. So in the first part of the book we explore their personalities, and then in some way they are connected through this mermaid during the novel. I found this book to be very beautifully written. I especially loved reading about Angelica, who is actually a whore. There is something about that profession that highly intrigues me, but Mr. Hancock was also very intriguing to read about, and the both of them combined made for a great historical fiction that read like a book from the 1800s, which is the century it's also set, I'm pretty sure. But it's actually a book that was written and published like last year. For spot number 5, I'm going to return to non-fiction. I have here Stephen King's On Writing, a Memoir of the Craft. This is a book divided into 3 parts. The first part is about Stephen King's childhood. The second part is about the craft of writing. In this part, Stephen King provides us with a toolbox of things you need to know if you want to write your own book. And while I adored the childhood part of the book, I also really loved this toolbox part. I think that even though you're not set out to write your own book, it's still interesting to read about this toolbox of his, because he provides you with some tips that you can recognize when reading books in general. And the third part is about an event that took place while Stephen King was writing this book. It's about an accident that nearly killed him. So needless to say, that's a very interesting part to read as well. All in all, these 3 parts make for a great book on writing and on what it's like to be a writer and struggle to get those books published and also maintain your family. At spot number 4, I have In Order to Live by Yeonmi Park. Now, I love this book because it was a huge eye-opener for me back in the spring. I was interested to learn more about North Korea, and this is the account of a girl who grew up in that country, and thankfully she escaped it. But this is her account on what that childhood was like and what the conditions of the people of North Korea were actually like. It's a first witness account, and that's what makes it very scary but also very important to read, I think. So needless to say, this is a brutal read, but it's also one that, as I said, was an eye-opener, and it's one that I couldn't help think about for weeks and weeks after I had finished reading it. We have now made it to the top 3 of my absolute favorite books of 2018 so far. At spot number 3, I have The Clay Girl by Heather Tugger. This is another one of those books that I was about to unhaul without having read it, because it's been on my shelves for years and I didn't feel like I was interested enough in it. But I gave it a chance, and I'm so thankful I did, because this book was pure beauty. It's about this main character who lives in a family that is not able to provide for her and her siblings, but they still live with their parents and they suffer from their parents' ignorance. The main character creates a seahorse in her head that helps her deal with these horrible conditions. So it becomes a coming-of-age story about our protagonist who tries to grow up in this family and maintain her sanity. The language in this book is pretty different. You had to get used to it, and I had as well, but I felt like a few chapters in I had gotten the hang of it, and as I said, I ended up loving this book to pieces, and it's definitely staying in my collection for years and years to come. The second best book I've read in 2018 so far is The Idiot by Elif Batuman. This one is a book about a young woman who starts in college in the United States. She's a woman who is very interested in languages and culture because her family is from Turkey, but since she is living in America, she finds it interesting to compare the 2 cultures and the 2 languages and see all the nuances between. It's also a coming-of-age story about this young woman who grows up and becomes her own independent woman. And then towards the end of the book, we also go with her to Hungary. I'm not going to tell you why that is, but basically this book takes you a lot of places, and that's one of the things I loved about it. I also loved all of its observances on language, because I'm a language teacher myself, and I found it to be very interesting to read about her observations and her idea of the world, which might make her seem like an idiot, which is why it's called The Idiot, because she does come across as very simple and stupid at times. But I really liked her nonetheless, and this book is so good that it had to be on the second spot of my top 10 of 2018 books. I am pretty sure that you might have already guessed what the book on the top of my list is, but in case you haven't, here you have it. This is The Diary of a Bookseller by Sean Bythell, which is a non-fictional book about what the title says. The reason why I had to have it at the top of my list is because this is one of those rare books that has left me with a void inside. I want to experience this book again for the first time, and that is a seldom experience with the books that I read. I mean, a lot of books I love, but I'm okay with having finished them and cherishing them in my memory. But this one, I'm not okay with that. I did not want for it to end, and once it did, I felt, as I said, a void inside of me, because I wanted to be back in this world of a bookseller. I wanted to stay inside his head, even though he is quite pessimistic in his tone of voice, and I just wanted for this reading experience to continue on, and that is why it is at the top of my list. But let's see towards the end of the year if this one will remain on that spot. Who knows, but for now it's definitely on that spot. And that is my top 10 list of books I've read so far this year. I think that this list is amazing, and if my second half of 2018 is going to be just as amazing when it comes to my reading, I am thrilled. That is it for my video. I hope you enjoyed this list and this video. Thank you so much for watching, and until my next one, happy reading.